Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Hong Kong Foreign Correspondents Club. My name is Hannamiina Tanninen, and I am one of the two vice presidents at the club. And when I am not at the club, which is many days a week, I work as a Hong Kong correspondent for the leading Finnish business newspaper Kauppalehti. Hong Kong Foreign Correspondents Club was founded 70 years ago by journalists and correspondents, but today we are proud to have a very diverse membership from, of course, correspondents and journalists and other media professionals to lawyers, bankers, artists, and maritime industry professionals. For the past 40 years, we have stayed in this very building on Icehouse Street, and we spend a lot of money, time, and love to maintain this historic Grade A building every year. In addition of these lunch seminars, we organize workshops, art exhibitions, and now when live music is again allowed, the jazz nights at our jazz bar downstairs at the Birds is back. So those of you who are members, do monitor your emails because we do have a full set of jazz music coming later this year. To learn more about the club and how you can join as a member, go to fcchk.org or find us from social media with handles at FCCHK. Before we go to our topic of today and our wonderful panelists, I will give you a few words of our upcoming events. So we will have a club lunch, Hong Kong Kickoff Rugby Sevens, which returns to Hong Kong this year on 25th. We still have places for that available. We have a club lunch, Irish Ancestry in Hong Kong on 27th. We're gonna have a quiz night, Battle of the Newsrooms, November 10th. So if I see some other media colleagues, we're still waiting for you guys to announce your team for the Battle of the Newsrooms. And then we will have our regular quiz night on 27th of October. But our topic today is moving Hong Kong forward, Western business communities respond to the policy address. As we all know, the policy address came out last week. There are many aspects of the policy address, from education to housing and social services, but today we will be discussing Hong Kong as business environment and then how the policy address responds to that. And we are very lucky to have today 3 distinguished panelists. First, we have Iñaki Amatei, who is the man of all the chambers. He was first chairman of the Finnish Chamber of Commerce. Now he's the chairman of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce. And today he's representing European Chamber of Commerce. And those of you who don't know, he lived in Finland, my home country, for 25 years.
That's yes. Right.
Then we have Stephanie Evanet, who is the Chief Executive of Australian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong and the former Asia Director at the Advanced Global Australians in Hong Kong. Welcome. And in the middle, we have Eden Woon, who is the President of the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, and previously he was the President of Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand, among many other things. Welcome to the FCC Lunch Talk, and thank you very much for taking the time to discuss this important topic today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we start with short introductions to all of your chambers, because all 3 chambers work in a bit different, and you have a bit of a different organization. So could you give the youth, I get to say youth because I'm over 35, the youth call it elevator pitch. So could you give us a short introduction to your chamber, and how many members do you have? If we start from Iñaki there.
So we are the European Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong is a chamber of chambers representing European chambers in Hong Kong. We represent basically the interest of our national chambers members. So we do a lot of work in helping them to be a lot more vocal when raising the issues that matter to organizations like the government, and we create a lot of advocacy for them. We also organize some flagship events, like recently we have done some events in Rethink around sustainability, which is one of the main agenda items that we basically try to drive here in Hong Kong.
Yeah, and you said that your members are other European chambers, so you
That's
don't.
right.
Yeah, so you don't have like individual or company.
We don't have
members.
individual members.
Yeah.
It's national chambers
Yeah.
that are European chambers. That's right.
Okay, and what is the official number of how many companies or individuals or how many people you?
We don't know
chamber
how many
represents?
we are all together because
Yeah.
it's very fluid. I mean, last year the national chambers lost a significant number of members. But we were just discussing among us over lunch that actually we're starting to see a small rebound now after the summer.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Eden Woon, could you tell us a little bit about the American Chamber of Commerce and how many companies you represent?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank the FCC for organizing this and inviting me here to join the panel. The American Chamber of Commerce actually was founded in the late 1960s, and we're the oldest international chamber in Hong Kong. And some of you may wonder, gee, what happened to the British Chamber? Well, the British were using the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce before the 1997, and the American Chamber of Commerce was already formed back in, I think it was 1969. Okay, and so the membership consists of two sets of companies mainly, but then there are certainly some others. We have companies which are based in the United States, which have a business in this part of the world. And we also have quite a number of Hong Kong companies who do business in the United States, including investments or retail or any other business operation. And also we have some other Hong Kong companies or companies from anywhere around the world for that matter, which may be interested in what's happening in the US and what's happening on the American business scene. And so our members, roughly, there are about 600 some companies who belong to us. And out of that, there is individual representatives, and there's very few individual members. So if you look at head count, it will be almost 2,000.
Yeah.
So that's the size of AmCham. And once again, no different than other chambers. We're here to work on behalf of our members. We provide services, we provide programs, we provide network opportunities, and of course we make our voice known when we view certain things that our members are interested in or concerned about to the governments. And when I say governments, we actually talk a lot to the SAR government, but we also talk to Beijing, and we have a door knock in Beijing historically every year, and we talk a lot with Washington, and we have a door knock to Washington. And finally, we do, of course, although we're private and not government, we do work with the U.S. Consulate General, once again, for the benefit of our members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Evanet, do you have to tell briefly about your chamber
Sure,
you're representing?
thanks so much. Thanks so much, FCC, for having me here, and hello to the AusCham members in the audience. I see you. I'm from the Australian Chamber of Commerce. We were established in 1987. We celebrate our 35th anniversary this year of being in Hong Kong. We have around 900 members from more than 235 companies. We're growing. As Inaki said, we are seeing some positive sentiment coming out of the summer, which is great after a tough few years for everyone. We provide a platform for business development, for member networking, for engagement with government, both here and in Australia, on advocacy, and always a focus on the bilateral relationship. Like the American Chamber and the European Chamber, our members include Australian companies with operations here offshore, Hong Kong companies with significant investments in Australia, businesses that do business not just here in Hong Kong but in the region, as well as individuals working for multinational companies, SMEs and young executives. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Going to the main topic of the day, the policy address. The chambers have a chance to give kind of their initial submissions before the policy address is published to voice out their concerns or give suggestions what should be in the policy address. So starting from the Australian Chamber, what were your, let's say, 3 key points that you would have wanted it to see in the policy address, and were those things on the policy address?
Yeah, so we had 5 in addition to COVID. And look, the policy address talked to those issues as a whole, and they're no surprise, I think, for anyone that's doing business here. Number 1, COVID restrictions. Outside of COVID, focus on talent attraction and business attraction, and really rebuilding the image of Hong Kong internationally. So, I think we can discuss more about our response on those particular initiatives. We also focused on Hong Kong as an innovation and technology hub, Hong Kong as a sustainable and a livable city, as well as maintaining confidence in Hong Kong as an international financial centre.
Yeah. So would you say those, your 5 key issues, were they met in the policy address, and why was this?
They were certainly talked about. On investment and talent attraction, we welcome the developments. I think business has been calling for this for some time. We really think it could have gone further in several aspects around talent and business attraction. Yeah. We think there's some good initiatives in housing and infrastructure development, although there are some potential bottlenecks there that the government will have to address. But in a large part, we can see those issues are addressed. We think there's more to be done.
Okay. Can you mention 1 or 2 things where more could have been done, for example, with the talent attraction?
Yeah, we'd like to see more detail on the overseas enterprise attraction scheme. At this stage, it looks like it's a pretty targeted towards 100 companies internationally, and we'd love to understand and be a partner with government actually to help attract business to Hong Kong. And on the talent attraction, we don't think actually that things like the tax refund for property purchase will make that much of a difference in attracting people to Hong Kong. There could have been more work perhaps on looking at how long the path to residency takes, for example, or looking at some of the issues in the middle management as well.
Okay. Thank you. And just before anyone gets any questions, we will go to the COVID restrictions, but we will go to those towards the end of the panel. We discuss other things first, and we will have plenty of time for questions, for example, on the COVID restrictions, but we'll get there. So Iñaki, from the European Chamber of Commerce perspective, the same, what were your key, let's say, 3 things, and were these met? Where could have been done more?
So from the different departments that we have in the chamber, we collected a number of questions that we wanted to see raised. And from the Travel and Tourism Council, we actually wanted to see some policies that would actually help to reactivate travel and tourism, something that obviously Hong Kong was one of the main sectors behind the economy, and we haven't really seen that sufficiently addressed in the paper that we have in front of us. The other one was around sustainability and green finance. Again, I think that the policy address touched in a very high level, and we want to see a little bit more detail on how that is going to be put into practice. What are the policy elements that will help to really boost up that segment? And then there was a few requests coming from the automotive sector, where they were more about specific regulations that would help to increase the usage of electric vehicles, allowing, for instance, the installation of charging stations in public and private venues. So all that, we also didn't get to that level of granularity. On the higher picture, I mean, I think talent was definitely our number 1, together with the idea that in order to reboot the economy, I think there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in order to revamp the image of Hong Kong abroad, right? Which are the thing we think at the moment is really in its lowest levels that we have seen forever.
Okay, you mentioned the talent, luring talent into Hong Kong and the green finance. Could you mention 1 or 2 things where you would have wanted it to see more kind of concrete solutions, and what kind of solutions would you want it to see?
Yeah, I think obviously the policy address has a huge number of elements there that, I mean, we definitely welcome. But I think that, like Stephanie was mentioning, a lot of these they seem to be targeting a very specific type of talent. We think that Hong Kong requires a lot more than just very expensive senior executives. I think we need a set of talent that comes from very different disciplines and different sectors that probably are not well covered with what we have seen so far.
Okay, and with the green finance, what was
So with the green finance, we think that, again, it was not touched in a very detailed level. I think our group has been working in a number of initiatives from boosting the number of talent that come from the universities to looking into how the taxonomy that we have developed in other parts of the world can actually be also adopted here in Hong Kong. So we know that, it's probably a level of granularity that the chief executive is not supposed to go into a policy address, but we are very, very much looking forward to see how we can work on the next level, right?
Okay, and then coming to the American Chamber, Mr. Woon, what were the, let's say, 3 key points that American Chamber wanted it to see in the policy address, and were those met?
Well, just like Inaki has said, we have 15 committees in different industry and service sectors, and they worked very hard through the summer and on what they feel ought to be in this particular policy address. And so after the policy address came out, we did some comparison. And in general, I think that this policy address was pretty ambitious and comprehensive. But on the key points that you mentioned, one of the key points that we had, of course, was talent. We're very concerned about the loss of people, whether it be young or more senior, that are leaving. Of course, we don't know whether they're leaving Hong Kong because of COVID or because of some other reasons. And now we just have to see whether they return or not return from wherever they went to. But certainly talent is a key point of our ask. Another one is we're really concerned about the internationalness of Hong Kong, the globalization aspect, the connectivity of Hong Kong, and all the way from specific measures all the way to communication. And we feel that this part of really bolstering the two systems aspect of Hong Kong really needs to be emphasized and should be the key work element, work focus in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. And so that's another key point. On other points, whether it be we're interested in what's happening to cybersecurity, we're interested in the sustainability aspect of Hong Kong, the city being more out front in terms of sustainability, and of course the traditional International Finance Center. It does, but in general, I think that if you want to make a preliminary assessment, first of all, it's not too fair to make a preliminary assessment because a lot of it depends on the measures that flow from the general statements, and also depends on implementation. But on the other hand, this is where some of the caution could be, is that how well would they be implemented? Because don't forget, one of his primary points is governance. And he's put out, I think, 110 KPIs or something like that. And I think that that's important because in the past, there have been cases where offices have been set up, commissions have been formed, and slogans have been given. But yet, when it came to the implementation part, it sort of did not match the original rhetoric. So I think that, so in conclusion then, is that the rhetoric sounds good, and it covers a lot of things. In some areas, like talent, I think that it did a good job, but I do agree with Inaki that there are many, many more talented people in many, many different fields. And just focusing on only, even though I have a technical background, I think only focusing on technical background is not wise for a international city. But other than that, I think that we have to see how things are going to be executed.
Okay. You mentioned the international aspect of Hong Kong, and then the two systems, and then as well as cybersecurity. Could you give us 1 or 2 points on each of those? What you would
Well,
like to see more?
we're interested in the cybersecurity law, which hasn't come out yet, and that's of course of concern to many companies.
How is it a concern, and what kind of things
Well,
would you like to
they
see?
just would like to see
Yeah.
whatever the language will look like, and how it affects their operations or not affect the operations. And then on the internationalness, they just want to make sure that the rule of law, the fact that Hong Kong is a place where the freedom of people, freedom of movement of goods, freedom of finance, all the freedom of information, all that it really continues to make Hong Kong really the international finance and trading hub that it is supposed to be.
Yeah. And the usual metrics to kind of measure the attractiveness of, or like market dynamics of an economic area, you usually use things like stock exchange index, how many people are visiting, whether it's able to attract talent, and on all of those three aspects, Hong Kong is not performing very strong at the moment. You've all also mentioned that you would like to kind of make the Hong Kong's international reputation better. So my 2 questions to everyone is that, one, is Hong Kong still an attractive place to do business from your members' perspective? Because you all said that you've lost members. And the second is that, what are 1 or 2 key things that you would like to see happen to increase the Hong Kong's international reputation? So if we start with Iñaki there.
I definitely believe that Hong Kong is, and it's going to continue to be, a very attractive place for doing business, and it's going to be definitely one of the main international hubs in the world. I think what Hong Kong needs to figure out is that, there is no point in continuing this nonsense battle to be number 1 of APAC or Asia Pacific or competing against Singapore. Hong Kong needs to figure out what is their own identity and differentiating factors that makes Hong Kong quite unique for people to want to come to Hong Kong to do business. And I think it's very evident. Hong Kong is the easiest gateway to do business in China. And China is still, and it will continue to be, one of the biggest markets in the world for any organization that wants to be truly international. So if you want to be somebody that is doing properly business in China, given the fact that now China is actually pretty much locked for most of the people outside China, Hong Kong goes back to its origins in being that gateway that allows to do business in China in the most efficient and simplest way. So if you want to really build a new Hong Kong and the international scene, I think you can play that card. You can play the card that you are still the main gateway to do business in China. Now, if we think a little bit about looking forward, how you are going to make that possible and how you're going to attract people to come to Hong Kong, I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in getting people to realize that actually that's the best way to actually go into China. At the moment, the reputation of Hong Kong is very low. I think there is a lot of misconception about what is happening here. The last 2 years have harmed a lot the image that Hong Kong has. And I think today, even if you go out and you ask people to come to visit Hong Kong, they will still be very reluctant because they don't know what is the process. And the process itself is still quite cumbersome when you think about what is happening elsewhere in the world when you travel around. So I think removing all those barriers, removing also those misconceptions is what we are asking actually that needs to happen. We need to actually start working on removing the barriers, communicating to the rest of the world, and then start to attract people back to do business in Hong Kong.
Are you seeing in your chamber that the businesses are leaving Hong Kong?
We have seen definitely businesses leaving Hong Kong. I think if I use this metaphor, Hong Kong has been bleeding a lot of international blood during the last years. Now, the latest measures that the Hong Kong government has set has stopped the bleeding. But in order to basically get back the health, we need to get a new transfusion of new international talent, new international businesses coming to Hong Kong. And you are only able to do that if you find the source for that. And the source needs to actually be organizations, investors, employees, talent that wants to move here. We need to work a lot on that.
Okay. And Mr. Woon, same questions. What are the few key things that we can kind of raise the Hong Kong's international reputation back to its original level, and invite more people coming back in doing business?
Well, back to the prime attractiveness of Hong Kong that you asked earlier. I agree with Naki that the fact that China market is right here and the gateway to mainland China, that is a key. And also the Greater Bay Area, the GBA. It was not mentioned as much as we would like in the policy address, but there's no doubt that the GBA, along with mainland China, that is a big attraction that Singapore, does not, readily have. Now, we are hampered by the fact that the COVID policy up north is now quite restrictive in terms of access. And that brings to the point of when you said about companies leaving Hong Kong, because the ones that the members we have lost, we have tracked them on their reasons. Some of them have no reasons, of course. Some others would be because of COVID restrictions. They just want to see their family. They want families to come back and forth. They worry about their children, and they just left in March, and they haven't come back yet. Some others are, perhaps they find that Singapore is more friendly in certain areas to their business, and they moved over there. Some others, will have to admit, because of U.S.-China tension, they have pulled back their operation more back to the United States. And some others, they were originally managing the China business from here, but then now you can't get in. The China business become more managed by their offices inside mainland China. So that makes this particular office here less needed. And so that would mean also they could, say, drop a AmCham membership or something. So all I'm saying is that there are a variety of reasons, and it is unclear at this point whether they'll come back. But I will echo what Stephanie has said, that in the last month or so, we have seen new members joining. Our renewal rate for September and so far in October have been much higher than earlier in the year. So there is a small sign of optimism on membership.
What about Mrs. Evne? Have you seen businesses leaving from your business community, and what are the things that should be done in order to retain, the international image and more talent in Hong Kong?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we certainly saw a lot of individuals, the young executives, the SMEs. I mean, they were really hard hit. We didn't see, big Australian businesses not leaving Hong Kong, right? Australian businesses are here for the long term. And on the point about China access, I heard recently a lot of this commentary like, oh, Hong Kong will become just another Chinese city. And my point of view is actually right now Hong Kong is China's most important city. It is the gateway, and it will continue to be. And although we didn't see as much fanfare, I guess, about GBA, it certainly is a lot more. The term used in the policy address is integration project. So we see, Hong Kong as a channel to deliver on some national priorities, these new industries, INT, arts and culture, while also providing a platform that China cannot in terms of the international access, the rule of law, the common law system, the access to talent. I mean, the conversation about talent, it's not a conversation about, us in Singapore. It is a global war for talent, right? And countries like Australia have been very aggressive in targeting this same type of talent, right? High tech, financial experience, these kinds of talent is targeted everywhere. So Hong Kong really has to benchmark itself against, Singapore, Dubai, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, other places that are also building their own industries, and really go above and beyond, because we still have the big dampener on these policies, and the uncertainty that continues is around COVID. Where is the roadmap for COVID?
Okay, so before we go to the audience questions, could
I supplement? a little bit what Stephanie
very quickly, yes.
said, is that I agree that China, I've always said, does not need another Shanghai or another Guangzhou. Hong Kong is very much different. I lived for 5 years in Shanghai, and I can tell you, Shanghai is a great city, it's a great place to do business, but it's not the same as Hong Kong. And so Hong Kong does have a lot of advantages, and it turns out that in Hong Kong we have had a lot of crises in the past. I'm not equating crisis, but I'm just saying that looking at the negative side seems to happen a lot here. When China was getting into WTO, for example, there was cries that we would lose our position as a middleman. When the handover, of course, created a tremendous amount of anxiety. And even I recall when we started the 24-hour border access in Lok Ma Chau, there was an outcry that would be the end of Hong Kong in terms of retail, because everybody will be going up. So all I'm saying is that, yes, there's a lot of things wrong going on right now, but I think that there's a lot of things right, and we just have to cautiously all move forward, including the government.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And just as a yes or no question to everyone, considering what you've heard from your member base, not necessarily your personal, you can also express your personal opinion if you want, but what you've heard from your member base at the moment, considering all the COVID restrictions and then the latest policy address and the proposed measures, let's say talent attraction, has the Hong Kong government done enough to keep the international hub of Hong Kong and the international businesses in Hong Kong? If this is evident, if you would like to start.
You want a yes or no answer to that? I mean, look, if the business does not like uncertainty. Eden mentioned the cybersecurity law. We also have, ongoing implementation of NSL. We also don't have a roadmap out of COVID. So I think there's a lot to there's a lot to welcome in this address. It certainly steps in the right direction, but we need to work closer with government. Government needs to work with organisations like ours who have the ear of the international business community and can help promote Hong Kong and really bring companies and bring people back to this great city.
Okay, thank you. And very briefly before the question, we take audience questions.
I think that
yes or no, Mr.
I think that with the members we've talked to, they like the sincerity of this policy address. That there's really a huge interest here in addressing the many, many problems of Hong Kong. And they have identified the talent and also the fact that the business community needs help. And they put in a lot of measures, that they are sincerely trying to, hope to improve Hong Kong. But I think the doubt is really whether these will be done fast enough. In other words, we are in a dangerous spot here. Okay. And are we going to do these things fast enough and not just take our time getting these done? To me, the urgency is what's needed and what we'd like to see.
Okay, thank you. And
fully agreed. I think it's a conditional yes, and it's time is critical because there are some small and medium enterprises that probably will not make it until next summer. The big organizations then, we will be here. They will be here for the time being, but for the small ones, it's for those that really matter, that the government activates some of these measures and precisely opening the current restrictions or removing the current restrictions is quite key to accelerate the execution of these measures.
Okay, and now we're going to go to audience questions, which I'm sure we have many. As I said, we're going to touch upon the COVID, and now, does anyone have a question specifically about the COVID or the COVID restriction? Could you raise your hand? Those of you who are watching this online, I cannot see a single hand going up, so I'll ask so could you all very, very briefly mention one thing that, was there someone? No. Okay, could you briefly mention one like a COVID-related issue that you would like to solve, as Mr. Woon said, very urgently? So if we start from Iñaki there.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, removing all the existing restrictions today is quite key for anything. For attracting talent, if you have an opportunity to choose between going to Silicon Valley or going to Finland to work, and then somebody comes with an offer from Hong Kong, and you have the same package, but then you look at what you need to go through and what is going to be, how your life is going to be impacted by the measures that you have in Hong Kong, you're probably not going to choose Hong Kong today. That's a sad reality. I think that the implication for that, something that I didn't mention before, is actually that we also fear that Hong Kong is losing on diversity. And the diversity we used to have before that made it a true international business center is quite key if we want to really remain competitive in the future. And if we are not able to look into the measures that we have here and find those that are going to really make it and keep it a true international diverse center, then we might end with a shape of Hong Kong that is not exactly what most of us would like to see.
Okay, Mr. Wu, very briefly, what are one or two COVID-related issues that your membership base would like to solve?
Well, I think that other than mainland China, which has its own COVID policy, if you look around the neighborhood, look at Vietnam, look at Thailand, where I was. I lived there for 4 years recently, 2.5 years under COVID, and they opened up in July, and now their tourism is back to the old days. The traffic is as bad as ever in Bangkok, and they have a lot of cases, no doubt about it. Many people have gotten it, but they have moved on. In Singapore, of course, in this one case, I think looking at Singapore is not a bad idea. And I really think that the openness is really desperately needed, because that is the first thing that is blocking the real opening and revival of Hong Kong.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Ahmed with the same question.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to see the removal of all restrictions as quickly as possible. I guess if we were to think about the step that would have the impact in the short term, where we have concerns about what does the coming 3 to 6 months bring. We've just seen in Australia a review of the nation's COVID response, and one of the key things that they talked about in that response was the detrimental impact of closing schools and on education. And I think for many people who are here, who have stuck it out throughout the pandemic, and to attract new people, some changes to the educational restrictions would be welcomed.
Okay, thank you. Now, does anyone have more questions? Before your question, please state your affiliation, and please keep the questions brief so we can give our panelists more time. I first saw a hand in the middle over there.
I'm Cal Anderson from Hong Kong Corporate Services. We help clients from around the world set up in Hong Kong. And if I look at the number of companies set up in Hong Kong this year alone through the CR Company Registry, we've got a higher number of registrations for new companies this year than we've had in the last 4 years. People are coming back to Hong Kong. But one of the things, it's not just the government of Hong Kong that has to do a lot of representation about internationalization of our city. Are the chambers and their door knocking also telling people in our home countries, in Australia, America, UK, that we are the same as we were before the protests and before COVID? I think people in the UK, especially the governments, don't want to listen to people like me saying it's the same place. Nothing's really changed fundamentally to our wonderful city. So in the door knocking, are you telling your own governments, EU, America, Australia, the same thing?
Yeah, certainly in our, thanks Cal for the question, certainly from our perspective, just 10 days ago we met with the Australian Trade, Tourism and Investment Minister. He's a new minister since the election of the Labor government in Australia in May this year. We've seen a change of rhetoric around the Australia-China relationship, and certainly we in the business community can see some change in sentiment in terms of that removal of the megaphone diplomacy and stabilisation. We'd encourage that further dialogue. The other message that we're delivering is that Hong Kong has some great strengths. I think part of the message that Eden and the American Chamber has been talking about, we support, right? It's the focus on the two systems and the unique aspects of Hong Kong that make it different to mainland China, and helping politicians and the people who support politicians, the general public, kind of understand that it's a long journey. But certainly from the business community's perspective, we want to focus on those fundamental strengths of Hong Kong and the attractiveness that it has for international business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Woon.
Well, I think that the relationship with the United States and China is not good. That's saying it mildly. So that really taints a lot of the perception about what's happening here. And we do our best on a business standpoint. And on that, we work very closely with the U.S. consulate. The U.S. consulate is the representative of the United States government here. And we talk all the time with the Consul General. We talk to their commercial people. They understand what the U.S. businesses here would like to see and what we want. And hopefully some of the message is transmitted. But again, I think that there's a lot of two systems here that really should be emphasized and should be done. And I would just saying to somebody that you will love this, but renewing FCC's lease will be a great demonstration of that two systems is, that's one of the aspects. So there are a lot of things that needs to be done. You're right.
Iñaki?
So I think that Europe is in a very different situation. Europe is actually having probably one of the most challenging winters ahead, with the Ukrainian war, with the increase of energy prices, inflation. So it's very hard to go back to Europe and tell them, do you care about Hong Kong? You need to have a very good reason to go back to them and remind them that Hong Kong should be something they need to focus on. And that's why we are a bit reluctant to go right away and tell them, come, we are open for business like we used to be. Because we feel that we are not there yet. We need to remove everything to be as open as the rest of the world, to go and tell them, come now, this is the moment, right? That's why we definitely want to work with the government in going out and promote Hong Kong back again. But it's going to be very difficult if we don't have a really good proposition when everybody is really thinking hard about other bigger issues at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I heard that there's a question from the media.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Laura Westbrook from the SCMP. I have two questions, if I may. The first is about what would you say it would take specifically to bring back both companies and individuals back to Hong Kong? You mentioned there was a small rebound, but why is that? And is there anything more you'd like to see? And then the second question is, what's your view on Paul Chan's decision to his choice of going to the Middle East as his sort of first trip abroad? Thank you.
Thank you. If we start from Mr. Woon.
I think you're asking me the reasons why they come back. Again, the reasons they're leaving and the reasons they're coming back, they also varied. Because some people that left is because of family reasons, and then their company actually never left. And so now they're back, and then maybe they're regenerating their company here in Hong Kong. And some others, I think the COVID measures, is a big deal. And what Yanaki said is right. We go out there and publicize Hong Kong today, and the first thing they hit is the COVID measures. So that when that is, looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm very much sympathetic that you have to be careful. You have to look at the public health statements. But on the other hand, I think that definitely is a obstacle right at the front door. But when people see that obstacle may be relieved or may be removed, maybe say in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and having these high-profile events coming here, the Global Finance Summit and also the Rugby Sevens, I think that helps too, to get more international events and get Hong Kong more in the consciousness of the world. And this separation is really not good for any communication or any understanding of what is going on here.
What about the second question? John Lee's decision to do his
about
first
Paul
trip.
Chan going to
sorry.
Middle East first?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea what the calculation is and where he's going next or whatever.
Okay, Iñaki, same questions.
So I think,
Why is the German visit to Beijing?
yeah, well, I'm not going to answer that. But I think that to some of the reasons, or some of the reasons why talent would move to Hong Kong and companies would move to Hong Kong, I think we covered a lot of them. I think, but in order to, accelerate and make them more tangible, the policy address covered a huge amount of initiatives that would actually incentivize individuals and companies to invest and move into Hong Kong. But I think we talk also today about a few that were probably not well exposed. I talk about diversity. Stephanie talked about schooling. We didn't talk about the use of English as a international language. These are some of the key fundamental factors that complement or build an international business hub. The moment some of these factors get eroded, disappear, then that status is actually affected. And I think in the policy address, maybe because it was trying to cover pretty much everything from A to Z, I think it was difficult to pinpoint some of those elements that the international business community, international community, find fundamental. So I think our duty is actually to collaborate and work with the government to bring them up into the agenda, and I think that's what we are planning to do over the next months. As soon as the government gives us a little bit of opportunity to discuss about these things with them, we are here to collaborate, we are here to stay, and we are here to build that international hub. So definitely we are going to try to make sure that, those things are taken into consideration.
Yeah, and what about the second question?
So the second question, again, I don't know why, but we would be very keen to see Paul Chan visiting Europe as well.
Yeah. Okay, and thank you, Mrs. Evanet. Same two questions.
Sure. I guess in terms of the immediate attractiveness, something that the international chambers and the local chambers have been calling for more than 2 years is a roadmap. What are the triggers and the points and the decisions that need to be reached for us to go to another stage? And we saw this work very effectively in Australia in terms of business confidence and understanding what would happen at certain stages. And that level of certainty allowed for the economy to come out of COVID, because there will be other challenges. Once these restrictions are removed, the world is in a different place. On the second question about Paul Chan, again, I'm not privy to his priorities or his schedule. We did just welcome Stephen Phillips of Invest Hong Kong to Australia recently, and look forward to more opportunities to showcase Hong Kong in Australia. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions from the? There's one more question from the media. Okay, very briefly.
Thank you. Alvin from Ming Pao. Hong Kong has always known to be one of the freest economies in the world, but in this policy address we've observed some of the more interventionist approach from the government, including a fund which is being described as the Hong Kong's version of Temasek. Is this approach, the change in the approach, something that concerns you? And on the current geopolitical situations, is it also realistic to expect a company with presence in America or European market to be invested by a Hong Kong government?
Very briefly, if we start from Miyagi there.
So the last part of the question, whether it is possible for Hong Kong to invest in foreign companies, I don't know. I would imagine that it is. Every jurisdiction has different restrictions, regulations around that. So I think in Europe, I think it was like last year or 2 years ago that there was a new regulation around foreign investments into strategic companies. So I guess once you are subject to that, there would be probably certain limitations. But in general, I don't know why it would not be possible, right? We should probably talk to some of the lawyers that are present on the room. The first part of the question, sorry, I didn't really understand quite well. No, we couldn't hear you very well. Sorry for that.
Sorry, just to repeat. We've seen the government has turned to be a more interventionist approach in this policy address. There are more approach which in the past would not be taken. For instance, setting up a government fund to invest in companies drawing cap. Is there something, this change in the approach, governance approach and its managing economy, something that concerns you?
So, look, I mean, I don't think we are concerned. I mean, as long as it really helps to boost the economy, which I think is what everybody here is looking for. Obviously, I mean, we will keep an eye on it. I mean, but for the time being, we didn't pick up anything that would make us really concerned.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Woon. Very brief.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the industrial policy and the fact that they're going to have a commissioner for industry. You know, this is something that Singapore has been doing for decades, and has been praises for that. And also there's been criticism that some of the things they invested in didn't pan out. It is not the matter of setting up this position or this policy. Many countries, many different jurisdictions have that. Is really again the execution, and whether it be just government bureaucrats looking at these, or whether it be as Inaki has said, a collaborative effort with the business community to look at what some of these main priorities of investment should be.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Auna?
Yes, certainly we support measures at this point that will attract more business and investment to Hong Kong. From our perspective, we would really like to see companies supported with less bureaucracy, a streamlined approach. When they are interested in coming here, they have the attention of the government departments, of the administration to bring that business here. So measures that go towards that, we certainly support.
Okay, we are already a little bit on overtime, so thank you everyone very much for coming to another Hong Kong Foreign Correspondents Club lunch talks, and thank you very much for our guests for the conversation and taking the time. If we can get a round of applause for our wonderful